Well, good morning. 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 I woke up with a blocked ear, so I don't think that should affect my speaking. What did you say, Will? Oh, sorry. Anyway, less of the frivolity. We're going to talk about the new wine and the new wineskins today. Now, I noticed Theo had some fantastic jeans on, but they've got rips right across the middle. I've got to ask you a question. So, did you buy them like that?
No, they're old. Dad's old jeans.
Did Dad buy them like that?
No,
because that perplexes me that people buy jeans that are readily ripped. Oh, more rips there. And this is quite perplexing. In my days, when your jeans ripped, you got a patch and you put a patch on it. And then when it ripped, you put a patch over the rip and then eventually your whole jeans would be all patches, and that was so cool, man. I had a friend called Woody, and his were just covered, bits of carpet and bits of everything. Oh, Woody, you are the dude. So I understand the patch illustration. And the makings of wine, I've tried making wine. The trouble is I don't drink it. But so I made some bottles of it. A friend of mine said, let's get some elderberry. So I made such beautiful wine. I had a few drinks of it, and I've got bottles of it. But I know the experience, because you have to get this, what they call a demijohn, and you put a thing in the top that releases the gases but doesn't let the bacteria get in or something. And so, obviously, while wine is fermenting, the tendency is it will be for it to expand. And if you're using an old wineskin that's already expanded, it's going to pop. So we understand that. But I'm going to stick to the new wine and wine skins today, and then we're going to ask ourselves what it was that Jesus was referring to. We're going to need the help of the Apostle Paul in this, and I'm going to use a lot of scriptures and quote them, and really it's your job to kind of, you may say, well, I'm pulling them out of context and all the rest of it. Your job to go and read the Bible and study yourselves, because I ain't got time. But Paul could have been referring to the new, in 1 Corinthians 15, he talks about the new body that we will have that will accommodate the resurrection life when we die. And he said our old bodies are not good enough for the new life, so we will get new bodies, which is fairly exciting for the Christian, especially for me when I look in the mirror. And so, brilliant thing. But I'm not sure that that's what's being referred to here. Not the future, but the present. And I think that Jesus is comparing the old covenant with the new. The old legal view of God and faith would not be able to contain the new life that Jesus came to bring. And it was brought up through this question through fasting. So they were saying, your disciples aren't fasting. And he said, no, they're not. They don't need to. And they were thinking, no, you have to fast. It's part of the law. It's part, you have to do that. And Jesus was trying to introduce, as far as I can see, with a New Testament perspective, that actually, no, that's not what fasting is about. Fasting is to draw you close to the one that you love, the God of love. And it's not about fulfilling some religious duty. And then he goes on to talk about the wineskins and the patches. So I'm going to go straight into the Apostle Paul and look at the incompatibility of law with grace. Paul contrasts law and grace. There is a difference. Now, I'm not going to even define grace. You hear about grace Paul told you all about grace last week, so I'm not going to give you the old definitions. You're just going to have to go with me. But it'll all come out. So, for instance, in Romans, Paul says, for Moses writes about the righteousness which is of the law. The man who does those things shall live by them. And again in Galatians he says, yet the law is not of faith, but the man who does them shall live by them, and those that don't do them shall die by them. And so basically the difference is that grace is the free gift of God's eternal life, where the legal principle is that you have to fulfill certain things in order to win the approval of the giver, being God. Paul applies it to salvation, and you've heard this time and time again. It's by grace you have been saved through faith, and that not of yourselves, it's the gift of God, not of works, lest anyone should boast. The two don't go together. It's not of works. In Romans he says, and if by grace, then it's no longer works. Otherwise, grace is no longer grace. But if it is of works, it's no longer grace. Otherwise, work is no longer work. He's saying that they are totally irreconcilable. The way of life whereby you do things in order to win the favour of God is totally irreconcilable with the risen, living power that Jesus gives, eternal life. You may say, yeah, well, that's applicable to salvation. But what about I sometimes feel that Christianity is like a catalogue. You get this wonderful gift, and then you've got to pay it off for the rest of your life. And it's not like that, because Paul refers to the conflict, the irreconcilability of grace and works in the Christian lifestyle. You only have to read the letter of Galatians. Now, I'll let you do that. It was devoted to the anomaly of trying to add law to grace. Say, now that you've been saved by grace, now you've got this to do, you've got that to do. And that's what it was like for me when I first began. I opened the Bible, I thought, what on earth? I thought I was supposed to be set free. But Paul would have told me off. He said, no. He said to the Galatians, I marvel that you're turning away so soon from him who called you in the grace of Christ. He says, oh, foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you that you should not obey the truth, before whose eyes Jesus Christ was clearly portrayed among you as crucified? This only I want to learn from you. Did you receive the Spirit by the works of the law, or by the hearing of faith? Are you so foolish, he says, having begun in the Spirit, you are now being made perfect by the flesh? He was angry. In fact, he said, I wish those that taught you, he said, I wish they'd get emasculated. He really had it in for him. He was angry. So talk about the disparity and the aggressive distinction between the two. Paul is very clear. I've told, I'll just tell him again anyway. But my mother bought me, no, I won't tell you this. Forget I just said that. Because I got, as a young man, when kids were young, and I got this through the post, Reader's Digest. You've probably not heard of it. It was a book that you got in there. And I thought, well, I don't want this. I'll have to pay for it. And then, so I wrote to them. I said, I don't want this, and sent it back. And then I got another one the next month. And I don't want this. They're going to make me pay for it, because I don't want to get caught up in some contract. And again, I got the third one. And I think they got the message in the end, because I never got one again until my mother said to me oh, did you get the Reader's Digest? I paid for the contract for you to receive it. Oh, why didn't you tell me, Mum? And so I got the wrong idea that I had to pay for something that had already been given freely.
Bruce, that's what happened to my mum and I.
Oh!
But my mum was a bit, I think she thought she was short of money, and she kept writing up to Reader's Digest, and they kept giving us books and that.
Yeah.
And we didn't really need them, but we had to have them.
Well, there we are. Well, maybe my mother paid for them. I don't know. Anyway, it's a position that we most easily gravitate to, this idea of paying back for something that is freely given. And again, my favourite quote at the moment is from Luther. Luther, the pioneer of the Reformation, said, this old tenacious mire still clings to me after 20 years of preaching about grace, that I feel that every time I come to God, I have to bring something to him for his approval. So if he struggled with it, you can guarantee that you and I struggle with it. So often God is saying to me, Bruce, he says, what part of the word unconditional do you not understand? Unconditional love. That literally means without any conditions. Added? No, none at all. Yes, but Bruce, there is a letter of James, isn't there? Don't stop it. We couch it in terms of we owe Jesus so much. We owe so much to the one who died for us. And when God loved us, he loved us freely, not so we'd pay him back. He loved us freely, trusting in the power of his love to transform us and not imposing some legal prescription in order to get something out of us. God expects the power of his love, but he does not demand, because he's loved us freely. It's the risk that Jesus took when he went to the cross. He just hung there, and all men shall come, all people should come to him. And so, what is our relationship with the law? I've almost said it, hasn't it? Well, we're going to go up a gear and explore a little bit more about what Paul says. And this is where Paul is at his most radical. And this is where I will probably be forever my most radical today. Any student of the Bible would do well to study Romans 6, 7 and 8. All right? If you haven't heard of it, go back home later. Open the Bible. Yeah, Sue, go back. Romans 6, 7 and 8. You won't understand all of it, neither has anybody else, ever. But it's so profound, and it will stimulate so many thoughts concerning the freedom that God's given to us. Now, Romans 6 talks about being dead to sin. It used to be, I don't know if it is anymore, very popular with holiness preachers about, whipping you all up to be dead to sin. That means we'll come back to in a minute. Romans 8 is a kind of a triumphant conclusion of the previous two chapters. And just popular, you've probably heard more sermons on Romans 8 than you have on Romans 6 and 7. There is no condemnation for those in Christ Jesus, it starts off. For what the law could not do, in that it was weak through the flesh, God did, sending his own son. That's it. Yeah, I forgot the rest of it. But it's the great liberating beginning out of Romans 7. But what of Romans 7? Romans 7 is the Cinderella of it all. You used to hear a lot of stuff, Romans 6, you'd hear a lot, Romans 8. Romans 7, poof. I've never heard a sermon on Romans 7. If you go into the hymn book, you can find hymns with relation to the Bible reading. There's about 15 to 20 on Romans 6, fairly understandable, it's a bit complex. About 150 relating to Romans 8. Do you know I'm into Romans 7? 2. And then when you look it up, there's not the main issue of Romans 7. What is it about Romans 7? I'm going to read you a long bit. Do you not know, says Paul, brothers and sisters, for I am speaking to those who know the law, that the law has authority over someone only as long as that person lives. For example, by a law, a married woman is bound to her husband as long as he's alive. But if her husband dies, she's released from the law that binds her to him. So then, if she has sexual relations with another man while her husband is still alive, she is called an adulteress. But if her husband dies, she's released from that law and is not an adulteress if she marries another man. Then he says this, so my brothers and sisters, you also died to the law through the body of Christ, that you might belong to another, to him who was raised from the dead, in order that we might bear fruit for God. And a closer look at Romans 6 confirms what he's saying in Romans 7. He said, you died to sin in the same way that Jesus died to sin. And you've got to ask yourself, well, how did Jesus die to sin? He never sinned in the first place. So how can he die to something he didn't? And then you look a little bit deeper, and it's thanks to certain people like John Stott, Roy Hessian, and other people. John Haldane, 15th century, he said, you've missed the point. When Jesus died to sin, he died to the power of sin to condemn him. And in the same manner, you have died to the power of sin to condemn you. His risenness is the representation of your risen freedom from the power of the law to condemn. And so he uses these terms. In Galatians he says, "For I through the law died to the law, that I might live to God. I've been crucified with Christ. I no longer live. Christ lives in me. And the life I now live, I live by the faith of the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me." So this is a radical thing to say. Paul was saying you're dead to the law. We carry it around with us like it's just a little side issue that we've got to add sometimes to keep us in check, don't we? We add a bit of law all the time. And preachers will do it. They want to just make sure you keep in. So let's give you a bit of law. Let's keep you under, under. But this is not the way of Paul. He said we were dead to the law, and you can't be more disconnected than that. This is a theological reiteration of Jesus' simple statement about the wineskins. The old wineskin of the law cannot hold the new life that Jesus gives. It must be discarded. Christ, says Paul, is the end of the law for righteousness for those that believe. The end. Full stop. Kaput. Dead. How more separate can you be from it than that? Dead. Now, why is that? The law's good, in it. And Paul says, oh yes, the law's good, but it can't do anything except produce more sin. He says this, living by the law makes the problem worse. In the book of Hebrews, it says the law made nothing perfect. On the other hand, there is the bringing of a better hope through which we draw near to God. In Romans 7 again, Paul says, but sin taking opportunity by the law produced in me all manner of evil desire. For apart from the law, sin was dead. But then the commandment came and sin revived and I died. And the commandment, which was meant to bring life, I found to bring death. For sin, taking occasion by the commandment, deceived me and it killed me. So the law failed because of our sinful nature, in that rather than removing sin, it just made us more sinners. The more laws you've got, the more wrong you are. And 1 Corinthians 15, he says it's not just the Romans, you see. He gets it all over. He says it's the sting of death is sin, and the strength of sin is in the law. Hang on a minute. The strength of sin is in the law that was given to try and stop me sinning. And so Paul has said, well, what is the answer? And the hymn writers sometimes get laws and terrors, they harden, but they work and work alone. But a sense of blood-bought pardon soon dissolves the heart of stone. And you know and I know it's the power of the cross, the love of God communicated through the cross, which brings transformation. And Paul says, therefore by the deeds of the law no man shall be justified for in his sight, for by the law is the knowledge of sin. That's all the law can do, is to make you feel really bad. And the good thing is, Paul says it's a schoolmaster to bring you to Christ, because it sails you out, so you go, oh, I'm blooming desperate. And then you say, yeah, you need Jesus. But once you've got Jesus, the law has done its job. It's not going to make you more perfect. It's just going to stifle the new life that Jesus has given to you. Now, how radical is that? Paul's answer is this. Listen to this. It's to remove the law. What an easy way to find that you're not a sinner. Well, just take the law out of the way, then you're not wrong anymore. I love that. It's a bit like when we go in the camper van. We only go to Scotland because it's free, except for the Trossachs. You've got to pay, you've got to get a permit. But all the rest of Scotland, you can wild camp. It's brilliant. We go all over. And there's no law, so there's no transgression. I mean, if someone puts some up, we won't go there. Go to England, there's a little niggle all the time, because in England there's a law that says you can't wild camp. And while that law's there, there's a niggle, and Carol, a very sensitive conscience, says, I won't be able to sleep. Someone's going to knock on the camper van and wake us up in the middle of the night. But you remove the law, then there's no sin. So that's brilliant, isn't it? And they're trying to get them to remove certain laws. But that's, you don't want to know. Where the law says, where there is no law, there is no transgression. He says that. He says this, for until the law, sin was in the world, but sin is not imputed where there is no law. And they charged Paul with what was called antinomianism, against the law. He said, and Paul was not preaching that let's all just do what we like and get naughty, you know. He wasn't saying that, but he was charged with that. He says, why don't we sin that grace may abound? As some are charging us, that's what we're preaching. Paul was accused, and in another part of the Bible, he was accused of preaching this. But he didn't compromise his message. He could have said, oh no, well, all right then, let's adjust it. He didn't change his message. Paul actually said, all things are lawful to me, but all things are not helpful. I can do anything, he says. I'm free. But they're not helpful. And I love God. And I don't want to do them. He says again in Corinthians, all things are lawful for me, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful for me, he says again, but not all things edify. And it's quite amazing, this message. But I'm a bit, you know, people might think I'm being a bit of a heretic here. But it's all there, and I think Paul was charged with it as well. I'm old now, it doesn't matter. But even so, I stand by it. In fact, Martin Lloyd-Jones, the preacher's preacher, wrote in his commentary on Romans 6 and 7, he said this. He said, if you preach the gospel and you're not being charged with being antinomian, it's a big word, I'm sorry, but against the law, then you're not preaching it correctly. So, I've got him on my side anyway. So there we are. I can't find any hymns about it. The only hymn I've found is, and it's free from the law, not dead to the law. Free from the law, oh happy condition. Jesus has died and there is remission. What poetry. That's the only hymn that mentions that. How many Bible studies I would like to ask? If I could do a survey, I've done on James, how many on Galatians? I bet there's a massive overload because it's our human tendency to have to get it right. Instead of finding out and strengthening ourselves in the fact that we've got it wrong and Jesus loves us and that love will transform us if we throw our whole weight into it. So, I'm just going to get practical now and throw a few ideas that I have learned in my very slow Christian progress. The constraint of rectitude, it's always going to be there. We will always have this around us. There's always somebody out there going to pull you up for something. You know, I get plenty of it, but there's always somebody somewhere. And we're living in you only have to pick up the newspapers. You only have to watch the news. That getting it right is the primary motive for society. And those that don't get it right like we think it's right are going to be in big trouble. It's how wars begin. It's all to do with guilt. And people trying to rectify their sense of guilt with getting it right and then making themselves feel more right by judging others who've got it wrong. And so the whole society, so don't be surprised if you find it a struggle to live by grace. You're surrounded, the church is probably the worst place. You've now got God on your side about being right. That's what Taliban's all about, isn't it? That's what makes them so frightening, is that they're doing it in the name of God. And so there's no compromise with them at all. But let's not take us as Christians, let's not get ourselves off the hook. And so we will always have to, there's a contradiction in the Bible, labouring to enter into his rest. It's a work to enter into not working. You have to work at not working. Number 2, it's a good thing to recognise this impulsive drive towards always having to get it right, or the feeling of getting it right. Recognise the stress and the tension and the striving, which only predisposes us to further wrongdoing, ironically. It's the stress and the tension of it that makes us worse. So recognise that impulsive drive to get it. When I'm preparing a sermon, it's the worst thing in the world for me, is that I've got to get it right. I'm standing in front of loads of people. It's going on YouTube. The world's going to watch it. I've got to get it right. And I've got to just recognise that emotion and that feeling and say, that is not productive. And to let it go and say, no, I'm going to maintain the freedom that grace has given to me. And I'll hope I'll do it with some form of integrity. But to be free is more important than to be seen to be right. Experiment with replacing the word right with good. When you're trying to make a decision, automatically, is it right? Does it tick the boxes? Why not try occasionally to ask yourself, is it good? It's a softer word, and what you're doing is you're replacing the legal category with the aesthetic. You're just saying, well, is it good? Is it wholesome? Is it going to produce that which is consistent with what God tells me about his love? Not is it right? Is God going to judge you for that or not? You know what I mean? Study beauty. Seek beauty. Collect beautiful things. Make beauty a primary drive in your Christian life. Not legal correction, but the beauty of things. Collect beauty. Someone said the teleology, that is the direction of the universe, is directed towards the production of beauty. When God said, when he created each day, he didn't go, oh, is that right? She got that wrong. Well, he didn't say, it's right. He said, it's good. And the Hebrew word for good is tov, which means beautiful. So when God looked at his creation, he said, that's beautiful. He didn't go, oh, I ain't got that right. Jesus, could you just change that? You got it wrong. That's not what I put in. Nothing like that. So, one of my favourite little hymns as a new Christian, something beautiful, something good. All my confusion he understood. All I had to offer him was brokenness and strife. And he made something beautiful out of my life. So we need to maintain that concept of beauty as central to our relationship with God. Try, if possible, I say if possible, because I know what we're like, to view God less and less as a ruthless moralist whose only interests are legal exactness, and more as one whose concerns are for our good. Not the one who ticks boxes, but rather as one who disposes of the boxes and just loves us. God's concerns are for our good. Why does he want, let's use the word right, why does he want us to get it right? It's because he cares for us. Because it's good for us. And why do we want to please him? Is it to appease him? No, it's because he loves us and he cares for our good, that we delight in pleasing him for that matter. What pleases him? It's our good. It's a sort of a... When Jesus said, go and sin no more to the lady, maybe he wasn't going, you better get it right next time, girl, or you've had it. Maybe he was saying, look, I care about you. What you're doing is destructive. Don't do it anymore. And so, number 6, remember that to live in unconditional love, we need to give unconditional love. The best you can do is pray. I know when you're watching television or you read the newspaper, you're spitting feathers. The politicians have got it wrong. He's got it wrong. She's got it wrong. But try and drop it for a second and just pray for them. Because unconditional love means that you're loved unconditionally. And there's a hymn, a little song from the Vineyard that says, the wrongs I have done and the wrongs done to me are nailed to the cross. There. Well, remember, Jesus died for you. He also died for the person that you disagree with. So I've said this. If you impose rightness upon that other, be sure that the same internal pressure towards yourself will increase proportionately. That is to say, if you are insisting on everybody getting it right according to you, you can be sure that what's going to develop in you is the criticism of yourself to do the same, and vice versa. So let's get rid of it. Oh, am I going on too long? Microphone. Sorry. Right, finally, the devil. The devil weaponizes the law against us. He'll use the Bible to condemn you. He'll pull out all the worst passages just to make you feel rotten. That's what the devil does. He's the accuser of the brethren. What is his purpose? Is his purpose to make you feel bad? Yeah. But his main purpose is to draw you away from the cross so that you begin to start justifying yourself. He wants to take you and say, you're rotten, Laura, you are. And you go, and Laura goes, oh, no, I'm not. And he's pulling you out so that you're away from the cross and back under these legal principles. Jesus' advice is to agree with your adversary. So when the devil tells me what a rotten Christian I am, I think, yeah, you're right. In fact, you haven't got the half of it, mate. Just look at that cross. And it takes the wind out of his sails. Agree with your adversary. Though the accuser roar of things that I have done, I know them all, and thousands more, but Jehovah findeth none. So, what a great Christian faith we have. What is the freedom that we're dead to these legal restrictions, that we can be fully 100% loved and open to love. The difference between the two, I'm trying to think of a couple of analogies just to finish off. It's a bit like, because my gears were going on the van, it's a bit like living by law is disengaging the clutch and trying to push the van up the hill. Living by grace is engaging with the clutch and whoops you up. Another better illustration for me, and it fits the song that we're going to sing, is it's like trying to fit the Scottish Highlands into your garden. And we've been wild camping I call it wild camping, it's only a van. But it's wild enough for us, it's not in a tent. But we've been, I didn't have a shower for 13 days. You don't want to know. But anyway, we loved it. But the amazing thing, we did get washed. Don't look at me like that. But we went round the Cairngorms and right round, and the vistas and the forests and the rivers and the wildlife. And it would be obviously impossible to bring it into our garden. It couldn't contain it. You can't do it. It's just so broad and wide. It's like living under law, but gardens, beautiful as they are, they're ordered. We plant a plant here, we chop a bit away to fit another one. They're contained. You've got your big fence post, right, the right Bible verses as your fence post, and then you've got some nice laws to put around it, and you're all nice and safe. Trouble is, it's keeping others out. Oh dear. And the garden, beautiful as it is, it's a very ordered way. But living by law and grace is like contrasting that garden that you have with the great breadth of the wild countryside. Out in the wilds, it's not disorder, it's a different order. The trees have a tree line where they'll go no further. Yeah, it's amazing. I see a little log, and it's like a little world in itself. There's little flowers growing here, a few mushrooms there, a bit of moss there, and they're all working in that. It's not disorder, it's another kind of order, which God is calling us into. He's not calling us into disorder, but he's calling us into a greater dynamic, relational order that comes through love. And such is the contrast between living under the constraint of law and the freedom that God's unconditional love brings, the old wine and the new. Up in the Highlands, you can see, as some of you have been, you'll have seen a golden eagle. We've seen a few eagles. We're not sure if they're white eagles or golden. And once I was driving the van and Carol says, oh, look, did you see it? And I just saw a wing. But she could sit and look at it. I was concentrating on it. She said it was an eagle. I could tell by the beak. It was massive. And I've seen them with my binoculars. And we see them. Once I saw one coming over the mountain. And it just kept saying, look, there it is. And then some crows. It must be Russell Crowe. The crows attacked the eagle and it ran off. I thought, well, some sort of eagle that was. But you'll not find eagles anywhere else. You won't find them in our back garden. I've enough trouble seeing a sparrow. We've got hundreds of cats more than this. But you'll not see an eagle even in the lowlands of Scotland. I think they're trying to introduce, because man's trying to do his bit in here. Come on, shove an eagle in here and let it breed. But the eagle loves to go into the highlands. And somebody said once, to run and work the Lord demands, and gives me neither feet nor hands, but better news the gospel brings. It bids me fly and gives me wings. And God gives us wings to fly. I find it hard. I beat myself up every day. But Jesus, I'm not on my own. Jesus understands. And I mean, it'd be awful. You've got to try not getting it right. You've got to try and get that right as well. He understands the struggles that you're going through to get it right. He loves you. And he says, let me help you. And he's given you his spirit to bid you fly and give you. I'm not here saying, stop doing that, trying to get it right. Live by grace. He's there giving us his spirit to encourage us. And come on, just let go a little bit more. Come on, I dare you, just let go. And you begin to fly. You feel your little wings flapping. And you go into and then you feel the thermals beginning to lift you up. It's not as much of effort as you thought. Hey, this is great. And then the next day you say, I want to do that again. And bit by bit, you begin to grow in grace. It doesn't come easy. That old tenacious mire still clings to me. I've struck gold, and I'm not going to give up. And every day, I hunger and thirst for more. And the more you hunger, the more you get. So anyway, we're not soaring on our own in this song, because it says in the song we're about to sing, Dave, and the song we're about to sing is, and I will soar with you. So he soars with us in the heavenly realms.